Good evening from London, all. I'm excited to be back as we are every Wednesday. And today we're talking about the chronic shortage of rental homes due to worsen in the UK after the budget announcement. And in fact, we're going to be looking at several interesting articles if you're a landlord, buy-to-let investor, which I'm sure you'll be very interested in. But even if you're a renter, because we have data that says that almost 8 of every 10 landlords has been saying that they've had the strongest demand for private rented properties for a while for this third quarter that just went past. That's almost 79% of landlords are reporting. So we're going to dive in deep as to what impact this budget has had both on landlords and tenants, with an article actually going as far as saying that the Labour government has pleased no one. Some would actually say that that's a good thing. If you're not pleasing either party, then you're probably being fair to both parties. I mean, let's look at the articles and you could be the judge of that. So first things first, let's get a few technical things out the way. Always want to find out if you can in fact hear me rather than just see my lips move. So audio guys, anyone who's jumped in, I can see Jonathan. Hi Jonathan, good to have you online. Stephen, hi Stephen. Thank you Stephen, much appreciated. And you can see me. I'm going to assume that we're all good to go. One thing we like to do with these live webinars, live streams, is definitely interactive. So if you have any comments, any questions, feel free to send them across. If you miss anything, don't worry, these are recorded, so you can always go back and listen to them. And this is also, you can join through different platforms, I believe sort of Facebook, Instagram and so forth, and also YouTube, of course. Okay guys, so I am keen to kick in, and here we go. First one, it's here, an article from NRLA, and we've got chronic shortage of rental homes to worsen post-budget. So tenants are set to find it even harder to find a home to let, with new data showing a severe shortage of rental homes is set to accelerate by the announcement of the last budget. Now, that's a scary thing. If we are seeing renters finding it even more challenging now, or going to find it more challenging due to the announcement of the budget the last few weeks, I think that's worrying for both landlords and renters, because we don't want a repeat of what we saw sort of around about a year and a half ago, whereby a property was put on the market and within a 24 hours you had to bring that down because you had literally hundreds of inquiries. And, you know, when it came to offers, I mean, people were just offering. You'll have multiple offers. I'm not saying one or two. I'm talking about 10, 20 offers with people not even seeing the property. And I say that's not good for landlords, and that's not good for tenants, and it's not good for the market either. It's not sustainable. But let's dive in. So we've got, as I said, almost 8 of 10 landlords reporting high demand in the private sector for the third quarter. And then we've got, but while demand is high, with recent figures from Zoopla showing that there are 21 households competing for every property to rent, the report shows 19% of landlords across England and Wales sold homes over the previous 12 months. Now, that is a high number. Those are double-digit numbers. But what makes it even more scary, I want to try and dig out this article, is that for the next 12 months, it's estimated that almost 45% of landlords are planning on selling their properties. So I'll repeat that. So 19% of landlords have sold their properties in the last 12 months. And there's a recent report that says that 45% of landlords are planning on selling their homes over the course of the next 12 months. So I just want to emphasize those numbers because that's important. And we'll also dig down as to what type of landlords these are, because we also have landlords that, believe it or not, are actually expanding their portfolios and finding great opportunities where other smaller casual landlords are actually decided to exit for different reasons. So the number planning to sell is predicted to grow. Here you are. 41%. So I was off by a few percentages. landlords are saying to plan to sell at least some of their properties compared to 6% saying they would buy. So this dip in the number of those planning to purchase could be attributed to Chancellor's decision to increase the stamp duty levy on homes to let from 3 to 5% with immediate effect. So the decision, and by the way, that's probably also the decision of a lot of landlords selling their properties right now because they may find it more challenging, or dare I say it, not get the money that they'd like to get next year because of that, the change of that stamp duty land tax. So, warning. The NRLA echoed this warning, explaining that for the vast majority of tenants, landlords selling properties spells bad news, with only 1 in 8 renters able to purchase a home in the area in which they currently live, according to Oxford Economics. So this will be compounded by other decisions made by the budget. And hopefully you can see this, which will further stifle supply in the rental market. These include moves to increase the stamp duty for first-time buyers. So what we had was first-time buyers being able to make the most of the lower threshold, or the higher threshold, should I say. And of course, that's going to change next year. And we showed a graph last week with regards to how first-time buyers are going to be worse off, especially within a certain price bracket. So again, renters, buyers, tenants, landlords, it doesn't seem that anyone's pleased with this budget. So meanwhile, mortgage rates are expected to remain higher for longer than expected, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility. Sorry, guys, I almost feel like I'm the bearer of bad news for everyone here. But there is good news, I promise. Just stay on, because further on, there's going to be good news for those landlords and those buy-to-let investors who choose to stay and expand their portfolio, but using a specific strategy to do so. So NRLA argues the lack of housing in the rental market will be felt hardest by those in receipt for housing benefit who face the prospect of their support for housing costs being frozen from next year. And that's not the only problem in areas where you have high housing benefit renters. That's not the only issue. So here's the next issue. For those people in those regions that are less appealing or perceived as a higher risk to buy-to-let investors, these are the areas that are going to be less stock available. Why is that? Well, because of the Renters' Rights Bill that is going to be implemented, I don't know, in the next few months maybe, but certainly next year at some point, that's going to make it more challenging for landlords to evict tenants. And, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been sitting in a lot of discussions, but it's even going to be even more challenging to evict tenants who are problematic, who can be more challenging, not paying the rent and so forth. And so the regions where this type of problematic tenants is more popular and more common, should I say, these are the regions where landlords are getting up and selling the most, because they now are no longer going to have that Section 21 sort of having sort of in their back pocket to be able to ask the tenants to vacate. That is the biggest challenge that we're seeing now. And those are the regions where we're seeing most of the landlords actually selling up, or at least the landlords that we're seeing at the moment. So I just wanted to point that out. Guys, again, this is an interactive live stream. So if there's anything that you did want to ask, feel free to just drop it on the chat and I will come to you. I promise I will come back to you. So meanwhile, mortgage inspector, so yeah. So the lack of housing in the rental market will be affected the hardest for those housing benefit who face the prospect of the support of housing being frozen. So Ben Beadle, Chief Executive of NRLA, tenants the length of breadth of the country know that there are not enough homes to rent. Rather than seeking to tackle it, the government is instead doubling down on policies that have caused the chasm between supply and demand to widen in the first place. So whilst landlords selling up might benefit a minority of tenants in the position to afford a home of their own, the vast majority will face a growing struggle to access rental homes. So, I mean, Ben Beadle does make a great point there, because the challenge and the rental housing crisis that we have in the UK for many years doesn't come down to rogue landlords. I mean, yes, we want those rogue landlords out, and anything the government can do to kind of filter them out and so they just leave the market, make their lives really hard, I'm all for it. But unfortunately, they are focusing more so on beating the majority of landlords out there, good and bad, the good, the ugly, and the bad. And the issue with that is that quite a few landlords are exiting the market. And what they should be focusing on, quite frankly, is more housing. And they say they're going to build 1.5 million. I'm not an expert in the field, but I've seen quite a few people who are experts in that sector and say it's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. So, keep an eye on this. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so, because we're always keeping you up to date. So before I go on to the next article, I have a few questions here that I want to answer. So I have Jonathan, Danny, 41% of landlords plan to sell within a year. What would be the incentive then? What incentivizes them to stay in the market? Well, I guess it depends entirely on their position, the structure in which they hold a property on. So I did say I was going to share with you as to which type of landlords are selling up. And it is very much those small casual landlords who hold their properties in a personal name. Because Section 24, and I'm going to share this with you, this is some real data. Section 24 is the biggest impact on the rental market than anything else. It's not the renters' rights bill. It's not mortgage increasing. It's not Section 21 and the renters' right. It's that has an element to it, but it's not that, I promise. In fact, you know what? Let's jump onto this now. Given that you've asked the question, here it is. So what incentivizes landlords to stay in the market will be that their numbers work. And the way that you can make your numbers work right now would very be much if you have your properties set up and structured in a limited company. So what I wanted to show with you was this. Section 24 is the reason for rocketing rent, not landlords. And it's not only the reason for rents increasing at a substantial and a quick pace that we've seen in the last 2-3 years, but it's also the reason why a lot of landlords have exited the market. So you've got Section 24. Here you are. Tenant group Acorn claims that rent caps are the solution to curb rising rents. So the group also believes landlords have no guidance on what rent should be, despite many landlords using the market rate as an area guidance for setting rent. So this goes on to rent caps. So here you are. This is the part I wanted to talk to you about. Section 24 is causing a housing shortage and higher rents for tenants. So despite Acorn's call for rent controls, evidence from Scotland suggests they have had a negative impact, with rents rocketing by 14.3%. And by the way, guys, there's been a lot of talk about rent capping again. As sort of central government sets out to devolve to the government and to the council, give more power to mayors and so forth. That's something that you probably want to look at, and we're going to be putting out a video next week with regards to rent control. So make sure you subscribe. So Section 24 was introduced in the Finance Act 2015 by their then Chancellor George Osborne. And he was also the one with Section 24, by the way, and removed the landlord's ability to offset their mortgage interest from rental income before they calculated the tax liability and allow a 20% basic rate deduction. So Mr. Roberts tells 118 Property, instead of pushing for rent caps, they could make it impossible for landlords to stay in the business. Maybe it's time to ask why rent is so expensive. Let me read that again. Instead of pushing for rent caps that could make it impossible for landlords to stay in business, maybe it's time to ask why rent is so expensive. One of the main reasons is Section 24 tax, which is hurting tenants. He added, here's an example. If a landlord is charging £800 per month in rent, their tax liability could be £320. a month. That leaves them with £480, which is less than £500, less than the £500 mortgage payment, meaning they are at a loss of £20 every single month, £240 a year per property. The government doesn't want landlords to deduct mortgage interest before paying tax, unlike every other business. So before 2015, landlords could deduct that mortgage. And of course, if you're not familiar with this was phased out between 2017 to 2020, I believe, and which is why we saw that impact hit 2020. And of course, we had other factors like COVID accelerate everything else. Because a lot of people ask me, but Danny, this was implemented in 2017. Yes, it was phased out. It started to phase out between 2017 and 2020. And it wasn't until then that the reality of what was left in your pocket to a lot of landlords and they decided actually this doesn't work for me. And like many things, right? You don't really tend to react until you actually feel that pain. And it was exactly what happened here. Whilst we're on the topic of the Section 24, here was and after this, I'll come to your questions. I'll come back to your questions. So this was the result of a study from or survey from Property Mark. And it drills down as to what the outcome was of that Section 24. Sell properties and exit the sector. Before the introduction of Section 24, several landlords had plans to further invest in the sector by expanding their portfolios. However, because of Section 24, those plans changed. And here is a comment from a landlord. I've stopped any further investment in lieu of mortgage interest rate relief having been removed. I would have bought more properties to let if able to deduct loan interest. Now, of course, a lot of renters out there will say, good, this helped put a stop to buy-to-let landlords, right? Buy-to-let investors. But the issue is that if you continue to be a renter, this has impacted you directly, and this has caused you paying more than 30% more in rent than you would have prior to 2020, because this is one of the major factors and the reasons that rent have increased. So if it helped you get on the property ladder and you're a few of those, then great. But the many actually had to continue renting or continue renting in the market and having to pay 30% more. And dare I say, even more than 30% at the moment. So this was the conclusion of the study or the survey from Property Mark. So introduction of Section 2 was predicated on a need for fairness in the tax system. And then overall, this paper finds that the introduction of Section 24 had a wide-ranging consequence for the sector, its landlords and its tenants, most of which were not considered in HMRC policy impact summary of 2017. The measure pushed some landlords into higher tax bands and has reduced the financial viability of existing investments, with many reporting breaking even or being at a loss-making position. In some cases, landlords appear to able to withstand the financial impact, whereas others have much lower levels of financial resilience. As a result of the measure, those in that latter category have seen their living standards compromised, have struggled to pay bills, and in some cases appear to have been in a bad financial position. Listen, this is the finding of Section 24. If you want a copy of this, just give me a shout. I'll be happy to send this. But just to sum this up, landlords at the back of the Section 24 have adopted a few things. So first of all, it's a process of ongoing. So that is incorporation. As I said before, a lot of them decided to go through a limited company, but that does have its own costs. It has its own costs in maintaining ongoing costs. So that hasn't been an option for a lot of landlords, especially those landlords who only have one property. It's just not viable keeping one property in a limited company. And it says here, the administrative requirements by owning a limited company pose a financial and resource implications as well. So many landlords' rent increases had already done so to address not only their increased tax liability, but also increased business costs. So implication for tenants already facing broader living costs. And then we have here, to wrap this up, a lot of landlords decided to sell up, pretty much. So listen, guys, I'm going to go I want to go through your questions because I see a few here and catch my breath and get myself a little bit of water. Okay. If you're still if you're still on the live stream, we will be sharing much more in terms of the numbers, the rent, and what investors are actually doing. I hope that question helps you, Jonathan, with regards to your 41% of landlords planning to sell within a year and what's incentivizing them. So it's rental demand is high. If they are able to change their structure, number two, and also, actually, I just feel the need to share this. I'm sorry, but this is uh, directly to your question, and that's the reason I'm here, is to answer your questions. So here it is. This is what incentivizing them. Key findings as why landlords stay in the buy-to-let market. So long-term rental demand. 6 in 10 landlords, that's 60% of landlords, cited the ongoing demand for rental property as a key factor for the decision to expand their portfolio. Retirement income. Over half of landlords, that's 54%, are decided to stay in the buy-to-let investment market because it's going to be supplementing their retirement income. And then you've got 47% are deciding to stay because of capital appreciation. And this is by far the biggest reason, because when you do invest in property, I'm sure you're all aware, there are three buckets. Number one, you have the tenant that pays the debt. Number two is, and with that, of course, number two is cash flow. You should get cash flow from your property immediately. And number three, of course, it is that capital appreciation. So that's 47% or something like that. But then you've got over 30% of landlords decide to stay in the buy-to-let market because they see it as a better option, as a preference over other assets. And this is because it's tangible, it's flexible, it's diverse. I'll give you an example. You can have your property and you can rent it out to students. You can have your property and do service accommodation. You can have your family members live in there. It's very tangible, it's diverse. And also, one of the things that a lot of landlords I speak to is that it can be passed on to their children, and it's just a great way of building generational wealth. Of course, it's not easy, and it's certainly not quick. So buy-to-let continues to be a good investment vehicle, but it is long-term. If you ask me, Danny, I'm buying a property, but I'm looking to sell in 2-3 years, I'll say, don't do that. Big mistake. If you want to buy a property in today's market, especially with the stamp duty hike as a buy-to-let investor, you need to be holding your property for a while, at least 10 years, I would say. And in that same umbrella, flipping property has just become so much more challenging and more expensive. I really wouldn't want to be in the flipping business right now with that stamp duty increase. So, Edmund, how do current tax policies specifically discourage landlords, and what changes could make a meaningful difference? I'm not a tax expert, Edmund, so I'm not. I would say speak to a tax expert, but I would say tax policies that have specifically discouraged landlords, the implementation of Section 24, stamp duty, of course, will be a barrier to entry for many buy-to-let investors because of the increase 3 to 5%. If you're in a certain price bracket, actually, it's going to be 7% from next year. I've showed those price brackets before. If you want to have a look at that, make sure you look at my previous live stream. So I hope that's helpful. And then you've got here Martin. With 79% of landlord reporting high demand, how can we address the imbalance between supply and demand to stabilize rents? So, Martin, I'm not sure if you're a renter or a landlord. I'm of the opinion that regardless, sort of increased demand or a huge imbalance between supply and demand being sort of at the highest, is not sustainable. And how do you address it? If you wanted to address it, it would be more houses. So government has to build more homes to address that supply and demand imbalance. Once that happens, then rent will start to stabilize, and you're going to have a healthier rental market. And that's not going to come from bashing landlords. On the contrary, it's going to actually increase demand and reduce supply, which is what we've seen. I wanted to ask, what specific reforms should Labour consider to prevent further shrinkage in rental market? Oh, uh, that's a great question, Jonathan, and possibly a question for politicians. Um, I would say, remove stamp duty. Um, remove stamp duty. I think once you remove stamp duty, I think you're going to have a whole load of more people wanting to move, especially those people who are above 60 years old who wants to sell their property and buy another property to downsize. I think families who want to upsize it will make it easier. Not only easier in terms of more available stock, but also easier from a financial point of view. I think it's wrong for government to impose a tax on people moving, because that's effectively what stamp duty is. It's stamp duty. It's a tax, it's a land tax on people moving. So don't get it confused that it's this, money pot from buy to for that we grab from buy to let investors. It's not. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, Jonathan. Put that proposal to Labour, see what they say. In fact, there's an interesting article about that. I wouldn't be able to find it right now, but there is an interesting article as to what would happen, and there's a whole study about it as to what would happen if stamp duty was removed. I'm going to try and look for it here very quickly. If I could find it, I'll share it with you. I found it very interesting. How to abolish stamp duty. Yeah, no, can't find it. Can't find it here, but anyone interested in that, feel free to send me a message, and I'll find it and send the link. So, does the NRLA data suggest that landlords selling properties are doing so out of financial necessity, or are they moving to other investment options? So, that is a great question. Apologies, guys. I've got a bit of a stiff neck today. So that is a great question, and there are different reasons for that. So number one, there is a lot of scaremongering out there, Sonia. So quite a fair amount of landlords are deciding to exit the market because there is a lot of talk about Section 21 being abolished, and it will, and other sort of points in that renters reform bill. However, what I will say to landlords, at least the good landlords, don't worry. There is nothing to worry about. Trust me. As long as you're being compliant, yes, you've got more work to do in terms of being compliant and being top of things. If you can do that, great. Otherwise, my advice is look for a great agent who can take care of that for you. The best way to find a great agent is through a recommendation. Whether that's fellow landlords, a neighbor, drop me a line. We also have a form here whereby we can recommend. We have a solid network of agents that we can recommend across the country. And yeah, so that's one reason, Sonia. The second reason is, as I just shared with you, if you just jumped online, one of the impacts of Section 24 is that landlords are barely breaking even or not even making a profit. But then if landlords are able to incorporate, then that problem goes away. So that is financial reasons. It could be one, especially those landlords who do have their properties in their personal name. I hope that helps in terms of why landlords are actually decided to exit the market. It's a combination of things. So here we are. What immediate actions can tenants take to cope with rising rents and fewer housing options in the current climate? Oh, Kaylee, I wish I had the answer for you. I truly do. I would say make great relationships with your current landlords. If you have a landlord at the moment, and assuming you don't want to move, it's really keeping good contact with them. I know some great landlords who keep properties just below market rates. Those that can, because again, I hear so many times where I hear greedy landlords wants to increase my rent by 10%. I've been a great tenant, never missed a payment, kept the property in great condition. But what a lot of people fail to understand is that landlords also have bills to pay and their costs have increased substantially. If they're making a loss, barely breaking even, then they can't really, it becomes a financial decision at the end of the day. So yeah, my best thing would be rent, keep a great relationship with your landlord. If you get into a point where you just cannot afford to live in the area that you want or you need to, I mean, I'm going into quite personal here, but there are some a lot of companies after COVID have been offering flexible working. Sort of coming into the office. I have no family and friends who have, gone back to their um, boss and said, "Hey, you know what? I love working here, but I just can't afford to live here, and therefore, would you be okay because I'm going to rent somewhere else or buy somewhere else outside of the city, and I'll come into the office once a week." Again, I hope that helps somewhat, but that's pretty much all I can say for you, Kaylee. Okay, so what wasn't stamp duty introduced towards funding the war and never removed? Franco, I'm going to sort of try and go back to history myself. So I'm going to answer yes. And if anyone, if this is wrong, please shoot me digitally. But I'm going to say tax in general, Franco, was introduced, regardless whether it was stamp duty, whether it was land tax, income tax, whatever that may be. If my history serves me correct from my years back, um, tax in general was introduced to fund the war. So the king will send out their soldiers, to tax the wealthy. And it was only the wealthy. It wasn't the general public. It was just the wealthy so that they can fund the ongoing war. And then, of course, they got a taste of it and, spread it out to more people and increased it and put it in different places. And of course, as you all know, that is the government strategy, whether that's congestion charge that increases, whatever that may be. By the way, congestion charge isn't a tax, apparently. So there you are. Okay, guys, I hope that's been helpful, what I've been answering so far. I'm going to carry on going through a few very interesting articles. This one specifically being that the budget has pleased no one, including renters and landlords. And this article is from the Property Reporter. So, pleasing nobody, Labour's first budget is bad for landlords and bad for tenants. So, any hopes for the rental market making strong recovery in the year ahead came crashing down on 30th October when the Chancellor announced a budget that failed to please anybody. Currently involved in the private rental sector, be it landlords or tenants. So, there was an opportunity for Rachel Reeves to undo some critically harmful tax policy brought in by the previous governments. And that's a good point here, guys, because there is also a lot of Labour bashing, and it would be important to point out that Conservative, over the course of the last 7 years or so, haven't necessarily been landlord friendly. So that's something to definitely point out. So, in the current framework, landlords are best hit on all sides by taxes when purchases. Let me remove this if I can. Yes, I can. So, in the current framework, landlords are best hit on all sides by taxes when purchasing in the form of stamp duty, land tax, when exiting in the form of capital gain tax, and on the cost of operating a rental property business in the form of tax on mortgage interest. So really, this kind of takes everything that we've just discussed and puts it under one umbrella. I'm going to say that again because I don't think I did a good delivery on this. So in the current framework, landlords are beset on all sides by taxes when purchasing in the form of stamp duty land tax, when exiting in the form of capital gain tax, and on the cost of operating a rental property business in the form of tax on mortgage interest. So that actually answered your question, Sonia, if you're still online, as to why landlords are exiting the market. So there are several reasons. So I'll add to that, and being spooked by so many policies. So instead of pressing reset, ending the cycle of high rents caused by high taxes and incentivizing landlords to remain in the market, Labour has kept in place a tax system that already has the rental sector on its knees and introduced policies that could see it all fall apart altogether. So landlord leaving the record at record rates. As a result of the punitive tax burden they face, private landlords in the UK have been exiting the market at the fastest rate since the pandemic. So the government has tried to argue that when landlords sell, it is either to other landlords or first-time buyers. This is a nice fall, but very difficult to prove. And given the stamp duty land tax rate on additional dwellings, before the tax burden of running a rental property kicks in, it is hard to imagine aspiring private landlords are scrambling to buy these properties from landlords who are looking to get out of the market. So, where was I? Let's see if we have any other questions before we continue with this article. But this is a long article, and I'm going to go to the bottom of this because otherwise we won't end. So, time for action. The government had a free shot to immediately reassure landlords that are left in the market to persuade them, but unfortunately, this misfired completely. With population growth at its current rate, we need to increase the private rental sector. The cold reality is that keeping it in the same or worse shrinking, it will see a spike in homelessness. So the sooner this disaster tax regime is repealed, the better for both landlords and tenants. You're a tenant listening in. What's your thoughts? Would be very interesting. So, do we have another question here from Franco? No, we do not. And when it comes to your question with regards to investment, Sonia, yes, I mean, we have seen quite a fair amount of landlords leave, but these are more smaller and casual landlords. When we see sort of those portfolio landlords, we've also seen them diversify in two ways. So one of those ways is diversifying to areas that are more attractive in terms of price being lower. So to the north, to be more specific, because a lot of those landlords are from the southeast and they're setting up companies, limited companies here in the southeast. But what's interesting is to see that only a proportion of those landlords continue to buy properties in the southeast, but they're diversifying to the north. Number one. Number two, and yeah, they are diversifying to other assets, including sort of shares and, dare I say it, crypto. Don't ask me my opinion on crypto. Don't ask me my opinion on crypto because I have a love-hate with it, and I don't want to dive into that. So, okay, guys, I don't know if there are any other questions. I don't see any other questions. But in the meantime, I'm going to share with you the rent to rise 18% in the next 5 years. And this article is from Letting Agent today. And because, of course, what happens is, based on what we've seen so far, demand increases, supply decreases, naturally rent will rise. And we have rent to rise 80% in the next 5 years. I think that's actually quite conservative to other articles that I've seen. I mean, if we take into consideration that rent increase probably 30% in less than 5 years, and of course we've had different factors playing and accelerating that. Well, let's see what happens. So, UK rents are set to grow by further 17.6% over the next 5 years, according to a property firm, Savills. As the imbalance between high demand and low supply is set to continue, and the agency warns that with more landlords quitting, that figure could rise further. But there are signs in some markets, particularly London, that affordability constraints will press the brakes on growth. And we're already seeing that, guys. We're already seeing that in places in London that rental price growth has slowed down, not decreased, slowed down. But let's put things into context. Slow down comparison to what? Comparison to a 30% plus increase over the course of the last 36 months or so. But there are signs in some markets. So while tenant demand has come down from its record highs of 2021, 2022, it remains at its elevated levels at the same time. The latest listing data indicates that the number of available rental listings per active letting branch was 16% below their 2018-2019 level. Let me repeat that. At the same time, the latest listings data indicates that the number of available rental listings per active letting branch was 16% below their 2018-2019 levels. So as a result, properties are letting 20% faster in 2024 to date than during the 2018-2019. And there is further upward pressure on prices. High demand and low supply have been the influence behind the significant rental growth seen over the past few years. At a national level, this pattern looks set to continue with rents expected to rise by above incomes. Again, comments by Guy Whitaker, research at Savills. So it's a challenge to see where an increase in rental supply will come from in the next couple of years. The increase to the existing stamp duty surcharge for second homeowners will only dampen demand from new buy-to-let investors. It will prevent some existing landlords from expanding their portfolio. And then you got the EPC. We haven't even mentioned this. This EPC is also something that's been spooking a lot of landlords, by the way. I mean, we haven't even made any comment on that. But if you're a landlord and watching this, whether it's recorded or live, it will be interesting to find out your thoughts. So, EPC is something that has a lot of landlords spooked. That is also a reason for selling up, especially those landlords who hold properties with awful EPCs, and they are calculating sort of how much it will cost them to get to the new standard of EPC proposed by the government. So there is, as you can see, landlords are being hit from either way, and it will be interesting to see what stock levels is going to look like over the course of the next 24, 36 months. So strong rental growth has stretched the finances of those living in rental sectors, limiting the capacity for further increases in some markets. So rental prices grew by 4% nationally in the last 12 months, less than half previous year, while London rents grew by just 1.5%. It will be interesting to find out this 1.5%, what is considered as London. So they're looking at Greater London, and when we look at Prime London, because there is going to be a difference. As everything, guys, when it comes to property, it is hyper local. So even when you see sort of these national numbers in terms of house price growth or rental growth, those are national numbers. But what we have seen over the course of a few years, there's a divide between the south and the north. And of course, you can effectively have two different markets doing two different things. As an example, I think it was the beginning of the year, we had house prices grow by a percentage in the north, but house prices growth not going up at all, actually dipping in the south. And so if you looked at the national statistics, it was almost zero because it was balancing out. So it is regional, and rents are pretty much the same thing. So property is hyper local. If you did want to find out what's happening within a certain region or a neighborhood, then it's best you reach out to an agent who'll probably be able to advise you best. They won't charge you a penny for it, and they'll be able to sort of consult. But if you are looking for a great agent, guys, just feel free to fill in the link on the description. We can always point you in the right direction with an agent here anywhere in the UK. So nationally, Savills expects the imbalance to demand over the supply will continue to override affordability in the short term, pushing up rents. But London, the market is already experiencing the drag effect of affordability, with Londoners spending as much as 43% of the income in 2023. See, guys, that's when I say it's not sustainable. It can't be sustainable when you have your tenant spending almost 50% of their income on rent. It just isn't right. I'm not saying it's for you as a landlord to fix it, but it's not right. It's not sustainable. It's not good for the tenant. It's not good for business. It's not good for the market or any stakeholder involved. So slower rental growth through 2023 has led to a slight easing of affordability pressures in London. We expect that this trend will continue in the near term with rental growth of 2.5% in London 2025 against income growth of 2.9%. So here you are. We expect to see more landlords exit the market, further eroding supply, and affordability will once again take a back seat. So you've got UK rental growth, London rental growth, and UK income. So 2024 rental growth 4%, 2025 you're looking at 4% again. And when it comes to UK in general, but then London you got 1.5, 2.5. That's interesting. Then you got income growth. I love this graph. You know, this is something that I'm definitely going to be sharing with you guys. I mean, you can't get better than this graph. This is great data, guys. Look at this. You got income growth 2.9, 2.9, and look at these numbers. Look at the rental. If we come here, 2025 to 2029, a total of 17% across the UK. And when you got growth for income 15%, and then here you got London 14%. This is amazing stats, guys. Listen, I love reading that. I like interpreting data. But what I love the most is hearing you guys and any questions that you have with regards to the rental or property market in general. And I do have a question here. So we have, what immediate action can tenants take? Okay, we've done that already. And then we've got here, what stamp did you? Okay, no, I thought we had more questions, but we clearly do not. Okay, so let's jump into finishing this great graph that we have here. This is recorded, guys, so if you have missed this, you can always review this again. So next up, I guess quite a few of you have asked, let me have a look here. Quite a few of you have asked with regards to agents. So let's jump on to this stat here. Especially as the renters reform bill is coming in very soon. And you have landlords should use good agents when labor reforms are in our law. So a property expert advising landlords to use good agents once renters' rights bill becomes law. The bill is currently making a rapid progress through the House of Commons and is expected to become law in the spring. And by the way, guys, if you're a landlord who's not comfortable with the renters' rights bill and you're going to get an agent on board because you manage it yourself at the moment, don't wait to the very last minute. Do your research, sort of interview different agents, preferably an agent that's been introduced or recommended by a friend or family or someone in the industry, and sort of do that now. Plan ahead, get that in place before spring. Trust me, I know why I'm saying this, because spring becomes really busy. You don't want to be not complying right now. Councils are being given much more resources to figure out who's complying, who's not complying. And this is the last thing that you want on your plate. We've seen landlords being fined huge amounts of money because they're not compliant. It's not only landlords, but agents as well. And the government, one of the government's aim is to give councils more and more resources to actually implement the fines that they have sort of to their disposal, which they feel that that a lot of rogue landlords are getting away with murder because the councils simply do not have the resources to monitor, all these regulations and legislations. And I say that somewhat with with a bit of caution, because those rogue landlords, they should be caught out. They should be called out. They should be fined. But then you have kind of those other landlords who, bless them, they just simply don't know what they're doing, from a point of view of one small document that they didn't provide to the tenant, and they've done everything else correct. Everything 99%, but it's just that 1% they got wrong because they got busy, uh, or they forgot or didn't know, and then they're being fined a huge amount of money. And that is the landlords that are being caught out, and I feel for. Because to be honest with you, an agent would have just been so much cheaper, to be able to manage that. And are there agents that are not worth their money? Of course there are, but there's plenty of agents out there that will be able to support you in the right way. So as a result of the volume of changes, including all tenancy agreements needing to be updated and reissued, it will be very difficult to stay compliant with the legislation without the support of a knowledgeable, experienced letting agent. Landlords, and by the way, I don't completely agree with this, guys, because if you are able to join a government body, I say a government body, if you're able to join an organization of landlords out there that will give you all the tools and resources to manage it yourself, you'll be able to do that. So you don't need an agent to manage your property or let your property. You don't need it. It's not about needing, it's about whether you have the time to invest to ensure that you're compliant. That is the question. Or do you even have any interest or the attention to detail or the systems to do it? If you do, amazing, do it yourself. It's not rocket science. It truly isn't. But it does require a huge investment in time, knowledge. So get yourself signed up with a government with a body out there. I think Property Mark perhaps also works with landlords at the NRLA. I'm not sure which other ones. So yeah, look out for that, guys. So landlords not following the new rules could face penalties of up to £40,000 for major offences. And by the way, this is just the new rules, but there are rules in place that could see you paying £99,000 in fines. And if you want to find out what kind of a violation gets you a £99,000 fine, make sure you go to my channel and you see, I think it was probably 4 weeks ago, in the mistakes that you want to avoid as a landlord, if you want to avoid their £99,000 fine. Using a qualified letting agent to manage your asset is imperative to avoid this and ensure you are as up to date as possible once the bill is passed. The government says that the speed at which it has progressed the bill so far since it was introduced to the House of Commons on September 11 demonstrates its commitment to getting the legislation in the statute book as soon as possible. The previous Tory government stood on a manifesto to the Section of 2010, Section 21, and enhanced renters' rights in 2019. The Rental Reform Bill was introduced in May 2023, but its progress stalled due to concerns about the impact in landlords and courts. And I guess that's the key difference, guys. The key difference here really is that the Conservative were a little bit more sensible, especially when it comes to Section 21, to abolish it. It was going out the window anyway, the same way as the Labour Party. But the key difference is that the Conservative were going to be a little bit more sensible in making sure that the courts were up to date before they went full force in abolishing Section 21. Labour, however, wants to make a point. Of course, they want to they want to deliver on their promise. A lot of renters voted for them. I was going to say, unfortunately, voted for them because I believe that renters have been let down. They've been let down. I don't think that the Labour Party or the Conservative, I'm not pushing any government specifically, but have done them any favours in the same way as first-time buyers. I don't believe that they've done them any favours either. I mean, if you've followed my previous live stream, you'll see that first-time buyers, especially those in certain price brackets, are going to be worse off, which is also going to impact the rental market because those first-time would have been first-time buyers can no longer now get on the property ladder in the time frame that they wanted, they may have to now wait an extra year to raise an extra 10 grand to pay for the stamp duty that they didn't have within their budget. And this is all thanks to the latest budget. So yeah, I mean, all of this comes together, guys. And my point with this was that the Labour Party had a great opportunity to fix the housing market and the rental market. I think the road to fix the market is certainly the housing supply, and also more specific, the high demand for affordable housing in the UK. I mean, I know when we look at London as an example, I mean, London has never met the housing target. It just hasn't happened. And in the meantime, what has happened is the opposite, which is the population grows and grows every year. And if we know anything, is that we are predicted. I mean, right now, when it comes to the population, we know that 50% of the population lives in urban areas. I'm not talking about the UK, I'm talking about worldwide. So, on average, 50% of the population lives in urban areas, so cities and urban areas throughout. And I don't know what the population is at the moment, world population. Could it be 8 billion? So 4 billion, if my numbers are correct, and live in these areas. And that number is set to double. People who live in the urban areas is set to double by 2050. Can you imagine that? So for buy-to-let investors, it makes sense to invest in cities and urban areas whereby more people are going to need to have a home. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, of course, as the years goes by. But that is a question to ask. So I have some final questions here, and we've got beyond retaining landlords, what other strategy could be employed to create more affordable housing options for tenants? Government just needs to build and has to give more incentive. I think the government, to be fair, have the right idea to build more homes in terms of getting more planning officers out there, perhaps getting the more training, more resources, perhaps lowering the red tape within the planning and development. So I think they have the right idea when it comes to that. But another thing that they're doing, of course, is this build to rent. The challenge I have with that is if it's affordable housing, then great with build to rent. But the issue is that the majority of these build to rent, they're not affordable housing. On the contrary, they're actually rather expensive. And I think that could be one of the main factors, the main reason that rents are we're going to see above average rental prices, because these buildings offer a lot of amenities, a lot of benefits, a lot of flexibility. And the spaces they're very nice. They're very nice property, but that has a cost attached to it. So if we're going to see the majority of rental properties being these build to rent properties, then naturally rents are going to increase. So yeah, that will be interesting. I think if they get that balance right with affordable homes with these new builds, then great. If not, then nothing changes. They're only just providing more rental properties for people who can afford high rents, and that is what they're trying to fix. Or people who can barely afford, I said afford, but can barely afford high rents, but they're spending clearly 40 to 50% of their income on rental properties. And could that be even more with these build to rent? I think so. So yeah, I think that's some of the strategies that the government can implement, Sonia. And then you got Jonathan. Are smaller landlords disproportionately affected by these policies compared to large scale property investors? So the answer is yes, Jonathan. And the reason for that is quite simply the operational cost that bigger landlords have that can be spread across several properties, be it 5, 10, or be it 50. And that's number one. Number two, the majorities of these bigger landlords have their properties as a business, so meaning a limited company. So they're going to be able to offset their mortgage interest, whereas smaller landlords cannot do that. and it's just overall have more tax, be more tax efficient than a smaller landlord. Because a smaller landlord, again, you can't be let's define small landlord. So if you're a small casual landlord, you have one or two properties in a limited company, it's just not viable in the long term. It might be sort of medium term, but you need to scale. So if you have no interest whatsoever in scaling your business, and I call it business because the government has done so much to the buy-to-let market that it has to be managed as a business. Gone are the days when you can say, you know what, I just want to have this one property because I may want a pension. I want it to subsidize my retirement. Well, no, if you're going to have that on your personal name, the numbers may no longer work. So you can't just be a casual landlord. The government has pushed this to an extent that you need to be a professional landlord. And a lot of people want that. Even renters. I hear a lot of renters that says, yeah, good, get the small greedy landlords out. But then, you know, we have corporate landlords in. Is that going to be any better for renters? I don't know. I truly don't know. You tell me. I hope that helps, Jonathan. And then we've got Wise here. Are there examples of successful rental market policies from other countries that could be adapted in the UK? That's a great question. I know examples of awful market policies from other countries, including rental caps, which we shared on this on our web live stream before, including in Scotland, Scandinavian countries, and I think it was Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, in which actually recently the government reversed it after many years of it being having rental caps. Rental control was what I'm talking about specifically. Sorry, guys, lost my way there. So rental control went very wrong, and this was in Scotland. We had this in a Scandinavian country, but also in Argentina, which was reversed recently. So, guys, if you've just joined, we've gone through a lot of stuff. We've gone through chronic shortage of rental homes. We've gone through the rental market prediction and how that compares to the average income of renters. We've gone through so much stuff. I really feel that this has been a great live stream and informative to a lot of people, and it's recorded. So if you want to go back and listen to it, you can do, because we also talked about how the recent budget has pleased no one. This includes renters, landlords, buyers, sellers. It's not pleased anyone. And again, as I asked before, if a government hasn't pleased anyone, does that mean that then they're doing something right? Because it means that they're being fair to everyone, because no one is happy. You tell me whether there's any truth to that. Keep safe, guys, and until